Chapter 11. Tragedy. The next morning dawned with a grim pewter sky, a perfect canvas for the somber mood that had settled over the Foster household. Each weak ray of light that dared to pierce the uniform cloud cover seemed muted, absorbed by the pervasive sadness that clung to the walls and weighted the air. The house, usually a vibrant cacophony of three teenage girls, a place of slammed doors, shouted conversations over music, and sudden shrieking laughter, was now eerily, unnervingly quiet. Footsteps were hushed, voices kept to murmured monosyllables, as if any loud sound might shatter the fragile, performative peace and unleash the raw, untamed grief lurking just beneath the surface. Emily emerged from the guest room, her eyes swollen and red-rimmed, her body feeling as though she'd been dragged through a thorny bush backwards. Sleep had been a fleeting torment, a cycle of jagged nightmares and wrenching awakenings into a reality that was worse. She found Anna already in the kitchen, meticulously wiping down an already clean counter, her movements slow and deliberate, a pointless task to keep her hands from shaking. Zoe sat at the scarred wooden table, mechanically picking at a piece of cold toast, her gaze distant and glassy, fixed on some horrible point in the middle distance. The house was draped in a heavy silence, the kind that pressed against the skin and seeped into the bones. It was not the silence of peace, but of profound absence, an absence so vast and complete that it roared louder than any thunder. The air inside was dense, thick with things unspoken, heavy with a grief too immense for words to possibly carry. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead, a sickly, fluorescent hum that cast elongated, distorted shadows across the table. On the table lay the remnants of a half-eaten dinner from the night before, a casserole brought over by a well-meaning neighbor. The meat had gone cold and greasy, the vegetables limp and colorless, the plates abandoned mid-bite. No one had touched them for hours, as if the act of eating, of sustaining themselves, had become an obscene offense against the grief that had taken up permanent residence. John sat rigidly at the head of the table, his broad frame hunched as though the very weight of the world had settled directly onto his shoulders. His face, usually so warm and open, was worn and gaunt, his eyes dark hollows where life and laughter had once shone. His fists rested on the wooden surface, gripping its edge with such white-knuckled intensity that the skin stretched pale and bloodless across his knuckles. Across from him, Emily watched him, her dark hair falling in tangled strands across her face. Her eyes, dark pools of anguish, searched his face with a desperate intensity. She needed to break the silence. She couldn't endure the not knowing, the terrifying void of speculation any longer. The quiet was a living thing, feeding on her hope, and she had to kill it with the truth, no matter how awful. Her voice, when it finally came, was a tremulous thing, but it was sharp, a blade cutting into the oppressive quiet. "Tell me, John. Tell me what happened, please." He flinched as if struck. The shield he had built these last terrible hours, the fragile wall of denial and stoicism he maintained for the girls, for himself, cracked audibly beneath the weight of her persistence. He wanted to stay silent, to keep the horrific image locked away where it couldn't poison anyone else. But her eyes, Jake's best friend, his confidant, his only real anchor in a world that often confused him, demanded truth. They deserved it. John's voice, when it finally came, was raw, gravelly, pulled from a throat strained by too many swallowed sobs and unspoken words. He tried to come home that night, after the movie. Emily's breath hitched. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, desperate for every syllable. He was lost, John continued, his eyes fixed not on her but on the horrifying memory burning against the back of his eyelids. The storm. The power was out on his usual route. He was trying to find his way back. His words faltered, trembling on the edge of complete collapse. He squeezed his eyes shut, and in the private darkness he saw it again. The broken path through the trees, the sinister smear of blood on wet leaves, the utter, violent wreckage left in the beast's wake. And then, his voice cracked, a dry branch snapping. His body gave an involuntary shudder with the Herculean effort of forcing the truth out. Then that monster. The Rangers, they said he could not finish. The word killed remained unspoken, a monstrous jagged shard of glass lodged deep in his throat. But he didn't need to say it. The agony on his face, the way his entire body crumpled, said it all. Emily understood. The air left her lungs in a silent rush. Her chest constricted violently, as though a band of cold iron were tightening, rib by rib, around her. The room seemed to tilt on its axis, the world swimming away from her. He wasn't just gone. He hadn't simply wandered off and gotten lost. He had been taken, violently, mercilessly, irrevocably, by something ancient, savage, and utterly inhuman. Something no human caution could have stopped. All her fragile hopes, the whispered prayers she'd sent out into the universe all night, that he might be found cold and scared but alive, shattered into a million glittering, useless pieces. And with the shattered hope came the guilt. It rushed in, swift and brutal and icy, flooding the empty spaces the hope had left behind. She should have been there. She was the one who usually walked him home, always. She could have stopped it. She'd been strong enough to fight off a stray dog once. She could have screamed, thrown rocks, something. She had failed him. Her mind, treacherous and sharp, replayed every choice, every moment of that afternoon. She saw herself laughing with her sisters, complaining about the long walk, opting to stay for one more coffee. In each one, she saw a different decision, a different path where she was by his side, where her presence alone might have been enough to deter the lurking shadow. In each one, she saw herself failing him. Her body began to tremble, a fine, uncontrollable vibration. Her eyes stung with a fresh wave of tears, and then the sobs broke free, ugly and ragged. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, but she couldn't stifle the sound. The dam had broken. She stumbled backward, her chair screeching like a dying animal against the wooden floor. John reached out instinctively, his lips parting to form some word of comfort, but no sound emerged. This girl, this daughter figure who had brought so much light into his son's life, was collapsing in front of him, and he was utterly powerless to stop it. Emily turned and fled, her footsteps pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm against the floorboards. She shoved through the heavy front door and out into the cold, sharp air. It offered no comfort, no clarity. She ran blindly, her tears blurring the world into streaks of gray light and menacing shadow, not stopping until the salt spray stung her face, and the crash of waves nearly drowned out the screaming in her head. She had run all the way to the cliff edge, overlooking the sea. Back in the house, John still sat at the table for a long moment, the echo of the slammed door reverberating in the tense silence. Then slowly, he pushed himself up and retreated to his study, closing the door firmly behind him. The room was steeped in shadow, the curtains drawn tight against the accusing gray day. His desk was cluttered with papers, official forms, a missing persons report that was now obsolete, a death notification, but he couldn't read them. The words swam and blurred. He couldn't think. His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the solid oak desk, his head bowed. He had lived through war. He had seen men torn apart by shrapnel, had held comrades as they breathed their last, had buried friends. He thought he understood loss, pain, tragedy, but nothing compared to this. This was his son, his boy. The image haunted him, the last time he had seen Jake alive. The awkward, sweet wave from the driveway, the half-smile. He had told him to be careful, to text when he got to Emily's, and then he had let him go. He had simply turned and walked back into the house, toward a mundane evening of paperwork and television, while his son walked into the gathering dark and toward his death. Now there was no second chance, no do-over, no apology. Only absence, a crushing, infinite absence. A rough, ragged sound tore from his throat. His chest heaved as the tears came. Silent at first, then harder, racking sobs that shook his entire powerful frame. He buried his face in his hands, ashamed of his own weakness, but powerless to stop it. He had to be strong, for Emily, for his daughters, for what was left of his family. But here, in the suffocating solitude of his study, the pillar was broken. The grief tore through him, a wild, uncaged thing, leaving him hollowed out and bare. And beneath the sorrow, something darker stirred, not just pain, not just loss, rage, a burning, purifying fury at the thing that had taken his boy. A fury so hot and dense, no words could possibly contain it. It was a vow, a promise, a new and terrible purpose. He swore to himself, in the quiet, sacred shadows of his study, that the creature responsible would not exist forever. It would not go unpunished. It would not take anything else from anyone, ever again. The crash of waves against the shore far below mirrored the pounding in Emily's chest. Each step back toward the foster house was a mechanical effort, each breath a sob torn from the depths of her lungs. By the time she reached the familiar front door, her body was shaking uncontrollably, her limbs leaden with an exhaustion that went deeper than bone. She shoved the door open and stumbled past the silent kitchen, down the hall, and into the guest room that had become hers. She collapsed onto the bed, face down. The shadows inside the room greeted her, like old, grim companions, wrapping around her as she curled into a tight, fetal ball. The tears came harder now, great, racking heaves that had no sound, but stole all the air from her body. They were raw, guttural, a pain so profound no language could ever hope to contain it. The door opened softly. She didn't lift her head. She didn't need to. She knew the presence of her sisters, Anna's steady resolve, Zoe's fierce compassion, before they even sat on the edge of the bed on either side of her. Their weight pressed the mattress down, a small solid anchor in her spinning descent. "He could have been gone at any moment, Emily," Anna whispered, her own voice thick and breaking, but resolutely even. "None of us had a guarantee of more time, not with him, not with anyone." Zoe, her face pale and her eyes rimmed with a redness that mirrored Emily's, leaned closer, gently stroking the tangled mess of Emily's hair. "It's not your fault. Please, don't blame yourself. He would never, ever blame you." But the words were thin armor against the storm of her guilt. They couldn't penetrate the icy certainty that she had failed. Her fingers clutched convulsively at the one tangible thing she had left of him, a flyer for a church bake sale, its edge charred from a long-ago mishap with a candle. Jake's handwriting, neat and painstakingly careful, was scrawled in the margin, "Don't give up," a note he'd written to her years ago during a tough time. It felt like a cruel joke now. Her sobs grew heavier, more desperate. Memories, bright and beautiful and agonizing, assaulted her, Jake laughing with pure, unguarded joy on the porch swing, his nervous smile before a school presentation, the serious set of his brow when he explained his latest fascination with train schedules, his voice whispering in confidence, "You're my only real friend." Gone. All of it stolen, irretrievable. Her grief turned primal, shaking her body with its force as she wept like a child, raw and broken and utterly lost. Anna shifted, pulling Emily up and into her arms, pressing her cheek against Emily's hair, letting her own silent tears fall. Zoe wrapped her arms around both of them, her smaller frame trembling with the effort of holding them together. Their tears mingled on skin and fabric, their three-part embrace a fragile, desperate lifeline thrown into a vast and hungry darkness. "You're still here, Emily," Anna murmured into her hair, the words a shaky benediction. "You're still alive." Zoe squeezed her hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "We're all here," she whispered fiercely. "We're all still here." The words did not erase the pain. They did not loosen the band of iron around her chest, or fill the hollow, screaming void where Jake had been. They did not feel entirely true. A part of each of them had died with him on that dark path. But in the profound darkness of that room, shrouded in shared grief, the words glowed with a faint, stubborn warmth, like the last embers of a fire in a freezing night. They were not enough to banish the cold, but they were enough to prove that not everything had been consumed. They were a promise, however fragile, of a breath taken, and another after that.